What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I am back with yet another collection update. Got another mixed batch here, some new releases, some stuff I missed from last year, even some reissues too. There's also some distro diving in here, of course, because I hit up Iron Fortress when I was shopping for something else, and then I ended up buying a whole bunch of everything else. Common theme when it comes down to distro diving with me. But yeah, we got a whole bunch of stuff here, so let's just get right down to it. Cathedral, Caravan Beyond Redemption. This is the 5th album from this UK stoner doom, I don't know, mostly doom. I mean, pretty much like legends in the scene, and I'm going to preface this with, oh my god, I can't believe Lee Dorian only got mentioned once when we put up that post about deal breaker vocalists, because like this is one of my prime examples of one. I love Cathedral's music. Great riffs, great atmosphere, a lot of Black Sabbath influence, and just a lot of like just 70s rock tropes just played much heavier. This one I would say is a little bit more on the stoner doom side. You get a lot more of the up-tempo boogie on like Freedom, Captain Clegg. Voodoo Fire, really solid opener once you get past the strange carnival that opens it up. The atmosphere in this album is very strange. Like the bass synth intro on Earth Messiah, and then I believe on the song The Omega Man, there's like some flutes that are kind of scattered in there, a little bit of like Jethro Tull energy. Dust of Paradise, the big stoner doom closer, is probably my favorite. It's slow, lumbering, ominous. Really dig the riffs, the atmosphere. Like this song is probably the most bludgeoning song on here. And while I love the music, in fact, I think a lot of the songwriting here is really clever, really catchy, like just lots of solid riffs. God, I wish this was an instrumental, because Lee Dorian almost completely ruins this for me. There's one song in here I would say that he's okay on, The Unnatural World. Like his vocals are less stupid, I guess. But the rest of this is just tough to get through because of his vocals. Especially the song Kaleidoscope of Desire, which is almost like a poppy alt-rock track, like them trying to, you know, catch up to the grunge wave that has long since passed. Or maybe it's like a more of a retro 60s rock thing. I don't know. Either way, Lee sounds so out of place because the song is a little bit more bright and melodic. It's not like lumbering and stony or doomy at all. He just sounds like the wrong guy for the job. In fact, like the rest of this album, he just sounds like a drunk ogre skulking through a forest of riffs or something. I don't know how else to compare it. It's the Lee Dorian vocal thing. I don't get his thing. It's fucking dumb. It's easily the most irritating thing on this album, which, I mean, that's kind of the thing with Cathedral. It's generally the most irritating thing on all their albums. This does have a hidden track though, too, like the whole long pause after the last track to throw in an extra track, which was, I mean, completely unnecessary. That's irritating too. But honestly, again, I like the music. It's awesome music. I just really wish Lee, I don't know, sounded like anyone else. I've never got the appeal of his vocals, but I definitely get the appeal of riffs. Again, if you're a big fan of, you know, like Black Sabbath and just like a lot of like early doom metal and stoner doom and stuff like that, check this out. If you get past the vocals, you're going to find a lot of killer riffs, but who knows, you may be a big fan of Lee Dorian's vocals, so this might not be an issue at all. Hell, you might already own this one. It's pretty old. Either way, check it out. Give it a chance. Contention Artillery from Heaven. This is the first full length from this Florida metallic hardcore act. Both Rick over at the Dreadful Minutes and Jacob over at the Upside Down Church gave this super high marks, and Rick was kind enough to send me a link to the CDs because I believe they only had vinyl or tapes for a little while. And I was a little shocked when I got it because it came in like an old school slim case that I think I still have like a box full of these someplace, though they're probably different colors. I hadn't seen a CD come in one of these in like forever, which is kind of problematic because no track listing. So I don't necessarily remember all the track names, but I will tell you, this brings me back to when I first got into metallic hardcore. A lot of that old Earth Crisis, like Strife, Snapcase, like early Victory Records stuff, the stuff that I really cut my teeth on. This packs that sort of punch. Lots of syncopated breakdowns, you get crossover thrash moments, shouted, energetic, bombastic vocals. This album sounds like it wants to fight everyone, and that is exactly the kind of energy I look for in metallic hardcore. Everything is angsty, mean as shit. You can definitely make some comparisons to some more modern acts like Judiciary, Spirit World, Drain, stuff like that. The riffs are chunky, they're heavy. A lot of that old school, like, stuttered single kick kind of breakdown stuff, you know, before it got, like, super heavy on the syncopation, like the mid-2000s. And again, like a little bit of thrash metal / crossover mix in there. You get, like, some hefty machine gun riffing, some thrashier D-beat sections. Some of these tracks definitely have some, like, ferocious Slayer riffs on it. Love it. My only complaints outside of, like, the thin jewel case, because, you know, I kind of don't like these things. Like, I really wish there was, you know, a little bit on the back, but, you know, packaging aside, my only complaint is it's too short. It's like just a hair over 20 minutes, but I can't really make any other complaints outside of that because every track in here whooped ass. There's even a clean instrumental on here that I thought was really killer, but every song in here packs a punch. It's vicious from start to finish. It pretty much does everything that I want from metallic hardcore. It is just riffy and mean as shit. You know, that's baseline what I want, but also it's catchier than hell. Every song in here pretty much like detonates like a claymore in your face. So yeah, if any of that sounds good and you're a big fan again of Strife, Snapcase, Earth Crisis, Shutdown, maybe a little bit of Terror too, check this out. Absolutely awesome. Decorticate, Conditioned by Violence. This is the first album from this Danish grindcore / power violence act. I'm still, you know, kind of fuzzy on what, you know, makes something power violence versus grindcore. It all kind of blends in. I don't care. It's heavy. It's vicious. I'm a grindcore fanatic, and this was 13 songs in 13 minutes. That's grind as fuck. And most of this is just high octane blast beats, shouting, screaming. I think everyone in the band does vocals and they kind of alternate. I don't think I need to tell you the songs are short. That was pretty much already telegraphed there. But there's a lot of cool intricacies in them, like good switches from blast beats to D beats. I guess the thing that might make this like a little bit more on the power violence side is you can definitely hear them alternate between like something that is traditionally more like grindcore, like, you know, Napalm Death or Nausem, and then switch over to something that is way more punk and hardcore laden. So you get like some good chuggy like beat down grooves on here that aren't necessarily like the biggest part of grindcore. The production on here is solid. It's very organic sounding, well separated. It's not like overly muddy. The bass on here absolutely fucking snarls though. There's some really good crusty D-beat sections on Concussive Maintenance and Mercenary for Hire. Some stuff that definitely reminds me of bands like Disrupt. And again, within these short songs, there's a lot of fun riff changes and stylistic changes. Again, like I said, like switching to hardcore, back to grindcore. And with that, I would say like the foot isn't necessarily always on the gas. Like there's a good amount of like groovy sections. However, like very short, like, you know, for a minute and a half song, you'll get maybe 15 seconds of groove before they go into a grindy fit again. But I like that. It breaks up the songs. And it can be hard to break up songs when you have like such short ones. In fact, there's like a 3-track run in here. I think it's Colonization, Vessel, and Defenestrate, which I believe Defenestrate is to push someone out of a window. It's interesting that the English language has a very specific word for that action. But all three of those songs are under a minute and they just blaze through, but they actually do stand out, again, because of the fun riff changes on here. Anyway, I dig the hell out of this. This is like right up my alley. Like, again, like Nausem, Napalm Death, Rotten Sound, Disrupt. Maybe like a little bit of Nails in there too. Just check this band out. If you're a grindcore freak like me, there's a lot of stuff in here you'll love, and even if you don't like it, give it a whirl. It's only 13 minutes. Worst case scenario, that's just 13 minutes of your life you won't get back, but, you know, you spend it listening to something really violent, if that's any consolation. Just check it out. Detest Dorval. This is the debut album from this Danish death metal act. This is the 2-CD reissue version that actually contains their Deathbreed demo. I actually have one of their EPs, A Moment of Love, which is interesting because it features a guy choking a chick. Anyway, I thought it was pretty solid, and I saw this one and was like, oh, this is the one that I think they're probably most known for. Maybe it has something to do with this very strange cover. Kind of reminds me of the blue chick that sang in The Fifth Element, except, you know, they wanted her to have her titties out. And oddly enough, she's got tan lines, which is, I don't know, something else to analyze there. I don't know. I have questions for the design team on this one. This is quite a piece of strange here. Anyway, the music itself, I think, is pretty damn good. It's more straightforward old school death metal, but they have a very prominent sci-fi theme, which generally you think of sci-fi themes being with, you know, bands that are a little bit more progressive, just because that kind of seems like that's how it usually works out. But this band is more rooted in just straight up old school death metal, very much akin to like Obituary, Benediction, just riff oriented, very sludgy, very dense production. It's not very complex or technical, but it does deliver a lot of like cool atmosphere. In fact, it starts off with like a laser fight, but after that gets into like some heavy, chuggy, mid-tempo grooves, a lot of double time grooves. You get some chuggier, thrashier sections on here, and once again, this is one that doesn't list the track names. They listed all the names of the tracks in the demo, but not the actual album, which is irritating. Anyway, it's dense, heavy, murky. Honestly, the production here, while it is a little bit muddy, it kind of reminds me more of like Finnish death metal overall. It's just a really interesting listen, again, with the themes and the music itself feeling like it doesn't necessarily match up with the themes in terms of, like, again, thinking it would have a more progressive sound. But they do add like some additional atmosphere on here to kind of give it more of that sci-fi vibe. Again, we have a laser fight that opens up the album. And then I believe on the title track, there's a whole acoustic piece with like recorders in it, and I suppose that kind of adds like a little bit more atmosphere, sci-fi atmosphere. Honestly, to me, it felt more Ren Fair than, you know, Comic-Con or something like that. It also shows up at the end of another track, I think the closing track, and it just feels a little off. Like this is a point where you'd think like some like sci-fi synths would come in and kind of like, you know, really just kind of close this thing off with like more sci-fi atmosphere to kind of cement the themes. And then it sounds like we just went gallivanting into Middle Earth, into like Hobbiton or something like that. Still, musically, I thought this was pretty good. And the demos themselves, honestly, I think the production on them sounds really good. At points, I did like the production on some of the demo tracks a little bit more than the actual album. The guitars are still very sizzly and gritty, but I don't know, like overall, there were points where it did sound a little bit better. Now, the second disc is a live performance from 1993, and I mean, it's a live performance from 1993. The production on it is pretty damn rough. It sounds like they, you know, sounded really good in 1993 when they were doing this, but it's kind of hard to tell by the production. But overall, this is a pretty solid album. It's a little weird at times. You know, I feel like if you just stripped out a lot of the sci-fi atmosphere, you'd have just a solid old school death metal album. But with that extra atmosphere and the themes, it does kind of give this like a little bit more, I don't know, depth, I guess. Either way, if you're a big fan of, again, I would say mainly Benediction, Obituary, maybe Morgoth too, check this one out. Pretty solid stuff. Intestinal Hex, the Exalted Chambers of Abhorrence. This is the debut album from this Canadian death metal act. It actually features Daniel Figlio, I'm sorry if I'm screwing up your name, from bands like Gut Void, Fumes. I think he's also in Puke Wraith too. He's got a thing with bands that have just kind of like disgusting names, and this one, in terms of an overall sound, might be the most wretched out of all of them. Before you get down to this swampy, just dingy sounding death metal, you gotta make it through some gasps, some retches, some pukes. And then once the music kicks in, I mean, it's almost the perfect setup for it because this is just absolutely rotting. The riffs seem like they're kind of like dripping out of the speakers. The atmosphere in here is cavernous and dense and kind of damp sounding. Like, it sounds like this album would attract a lot of mildew. It also sounds a lot like Outer Heaven too, which is also awesome. A lot of crawling, intricate riffs and just strange riff changes. And again, the production here is just flat out disgusting. The guitars sound like they're being boiled in bile. But it's not like super straightforward like old school death metal. There's a lot of intricacies to it, a lot of dissonant melodies. Very comparable to like Phobophilic, early Tomb Mold. You get some absolutely foul, dingy Death Doom sections on Lakes of Vomit and Parasitic Hallucinations. Yeah, the song titles are lovely too. I'm not entirely sure if the drums are real or programmed. They do have a more crisp sound to them. It doesn't sound as murky as the rest of the album, but I'm really not knocking it for that. Mostly I was just entranced by just all the sick, sinister riffs and dissonant melodies and some absolutely like putrid fucking vocals. The inhuman gurgles at the end of Experiments and Surgery are particularly foul. Very old school Bill Steer, but man, this album packs a lot of fucking riffs and grooves. There's a couple in here that just have some absolutely foul, heavy, just gnarly breakdowns. This is just swampy grossness done to almost perfection. I loved every second of this album. If you're a big fan of bands like Warflurch, I would even say Worm too, in terms of the atmosphere. It just, again, has that dingy, just kind of damp, foggy, gross sort of texture to it. And bands like Cerebral Rot and I would say Outer Heaven too. Check this out. This thing is an absolute banger, gross as shit, and I love it for it. All right, got a split here between Mausoleum and Anatomia. This one came out in 2020, and basically I could just say both these bands sound like Autopsy, and I would be pretty much 100% right. Mausoleum is a Pennsylvania-based death metal act. I actually got in this band courtesy of our good friend Tracy. She sent me a care package with all their albums, which all of them were signed, and I didn't initially notice that. So once again, thank you, Tracy, for doing that. And this is... I mean, you can almost do like a blindfold taste test with this in terms of like comparing this to Autopsy. And it would be hard to tell the difference between the two, honestly. Hell, even this band's drummer is their vocalist, which is a very Chris Reifert-ish sort of move there. You got the swampy riffs, you got like the more punky D-beat sections and harsh, sharp transitions into slow, brooding death doom sections. This band does Autopsy really well. You have grisly vocals, there's some fun samples in there. The production is very raw and gritty and kind of swampy. Again, very Autopsy. I ended up digging like all four of their tracks. Shrieks of Fright might be my favorite just because the death doom breakdown in that one is just particularly gross and savage. Yeah. Mausoleum does Autopsy well, and so does Anatomia, though they're a little bit different. Japanese death doom acts, very similar to like Coffins as well, but generally their style really lays more on the doomier side of things. A lot of their songs are more slow, lumbering, way more cavernous vocals, though on here it sounds a little bit different, and it might be just the production. This is probably the first time I would ever say that Anatomia sounds a bit thin. The guitars, which are generally the most prominent thing on their albums, they just sound very muffled on here. It's still gloomy, it's still dark and oppressive, but it kind of lacks that extra just swampy punch that this band is really known for. They have 3 tracks in here: Mangled Flesh, Rotting Innards, and In the Crypt. The first 2 are definitely more what I expect from this band. Mangled Flesh is a little bit more mid-tempo, whereas Rotting Innards is slow, brooding, lots of droning riffs on there. That's the side of Anatomia that I really love. The vocals in particular are just cavernous groans, lots of big like single chord chugs. There's even some cleaner sections in that song where it kind of gives it this like haunting ambient vibe. But In the Crypt was the one that really stood out just because I don't think I've ever heard a song like this from this band. It's way more ambient, way more propelled by synths and electronic drums. And in place of like the cavernous roars, you have, I guess what you would call throat singing. I guess it's like a dungeon synth version of themselves. I don't know, but I ended up liking it. Like it's definitely more of an atmospheric sort of darkly chill sort of listen, at least in comparison to the other stuff in here. But I thought it was probably the biggest standout on here just because I really wasn't expecting that from Anatomia, and I definitely wouldn't expect that from Mausoleum either. Either way, this is a pretty solid split overall. If you're a big Autopsy fan, I recommend both of these bands if you haven't heard them yet. A little touch and go in terms of production overall for both bands, but this is gritty old school death metal / death doom. It's supposed to sound pretty murky, but yeah, pretty solid split. And if you haven't checked out stuff by either one of these bands, I recommend just diving into both their discographies because, yeah, you'll find some awesome, swampy, rotten death metal. Which, if you like that kind of thing, that's awesome. And if not, probably don't bother. But yeah, just check it out. Phobocosm, Bringer of Drought. This is the second album from this Canadian death metal act. I got into this band with their last album, Foreordained, which was a suggestion from Jam and John to review a while ago. And we checked it out. I was like, dude, this is fucking awesome. And it was 100% what I expected in terms of like what John wanted us to review. It was distant, it was evil, it was doomy sounding, reminded us a lot of Immolation, which we later found out that this band actually covered Immolation once, so it totally made sense. I went out and got their first album as well. I really enjoyed that one. And I finally got around to getting their second album, which honestly, this one is different than the other two. This one, I would say, is way more atmospheric, way more distant. The songs are longer, they're more drawn out. There's, again, way more atmosphere. And honestly, I like it, but I don't know if I like it as much as the other two. Like, I like the other two because there's a good balance of just good, chunky, old school death metal riffs. A lot of Morbid Angel tremolos, those super low ones, and just creepy harmonies. But also a lot of like dissonant atmosphere and those weird atonal riffs. Again, very Immolation-esque. This one's a lot slower, more brooding, more distant, longer sustained growls. The harmonies on here feel even colder, even more dissonant. There's a couple of songs in here where there are some more prominent like up-tempo or blast sections like Tidal Scourge or Ordeal, but most of this feels closer to death doom than it does death metal, which isn't a complaint. This is just an absolutely suffocating, oppressive, dark listen. It just wasn't what I was expecting based on the other two albums I own. But this album has a lot of key differences that make me think this was almost like sort of an experimental album, like they wanted to kind of push the limits of like, you know, being more atmospheric or maybe pushing more towards a death doom sound. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I know that I do like this. The last track, Fallen in particular, is 11 minutes of world-ending, apocalyptic, fucking dissonant, hellish death metal, and it's easily one of the heaviest tracks on here, which, I mean, all 4 tracks on here are unbelievably heavy, so that is saying something. That song in particular, I feel like it just squeezes the light out of everything. It's like a suffocating black hole of death metal, and I dig it. I dig everything I've heard by this band. This is also a killer album. While I still might gravitate to the other 2 albums, this is just absolutely destructive. Bordering on, you know, Dragged into Sunlight in terms of just darkness and heaviness. If you're a fan of that, Morbid Angel, Incantation, Immolation, Dead Congregation, all the Asians, then check this out. This is absolutely awesome, and check out their other 2 as well. I still need to check out their first EP, but I'm sure that's probably gonna be badass too. I just have a good hunch about that. Pissrot, self-titled. This is the debut album from this Tennessee-based death metal act. I got into this band with their split with Ritual Fog, which is another Tennessee death metal act that I think is pretty damn good. I really like their stuff on their side of the split. I also noticed that this band is like really fucking young. I think most of these guys are still teenagers. And I've been meaning to pick this one up for a while. This came out in 2023 and I saw it in Iron Fortress's distro. I was like, well, fuck it, let's just get it. And I probably should have listened to it a little bit beforehand, but I didn't, just because I like the split. And I like this. Like, it's just brutal, nasty, swampy, caveman death metal, like a lot of Sanguisugabog and, you know, it's like 200 stab wounds and stuff like that. Like, it's riffier and chunkier than hell, but my God, the production here is pretty fucking terrible. There were a lot of points here where I kept losing the drums because they're so muffled in the background, and the cymbals on here just sound like a steady, static hiss, but everything on here is just muddy and clustered and not well separated, and it kind of hampers this because outside of that, I think the songs are pretty solid. You get a good blend of like kind of like old school death metal and flat out brutal death metal in here. The songs are, well, hilariously titled. Incest Deathmatch, let's see, Rituals of Molding Urine, that's a fun one. Sawed Off Human, and Malignant Savagery. I point out that one in particular because that one I feel like it was a different mix because it sounds notably clear, and honestly, when I heard that, I was like, okay, I think this is how the band is supposed to sound here. But yeah, you have like some interesting samples on here, some cool atmospheric sections. I want to say Putrescence has a horror synth section at the end that's really good. Almost kind of like Tangerine Dream, except in this case it'd be like Tangerine Dream. Premarital Hanging and Sentient Chunks of Abysmal Afterbirth. That's a fun mouthful. Both of those feature some fun pig snorts, which I just thought were kind of fun, you know, kind of the Gudalak sort of thing. It's not the entire song, thankfully. And, you know, the vocals on here are pretty solid. And again, riffs on here are pretty chunky, pretty fucking aggressive. It's just, again, this was mixed rather poorly. So baseline, I would say this band has a lot of potential, and if they get like the right production crew in the next one, I'd be really interested to see where they go, because this band still sounds fun. It's still gory and just ridiculously over the top. I love death metal like that. Again, if you're a fan of Sanguisugabog, 200 Stab Wounds, I'd even throw in like early Broken Hope, especially in here. Check this out. Production is more than a bit rough on here, but still, this was a lot of fun. Septage, Septisk Eradikasyen EP. This is the second EP from this Danish death grind act. Actually broke up, I think, last year after releasing their first full length. Features current and former members of bands like Burial Invocation, Hyperdontia, and Taphos. And this is just some solid, grimy death grind. Definitely a little bit of carcass worship. I mean, that should be a little bit apparent with the collage work on here. But honestly, there's a lot of stuff in there that reminds me of like Terrorizer. Lots of big swampy riffs, big death metal grooves. Like you get a good mix of like heavy death metal tremolos and then just like grindy fits of like D beats, blast beats, downpicked riffs. The production on here is muddy, but it's kind of like a good kind of muddy. Like the vocals feel slightly buried in the mix, but the guitars are so swampy and thick. And again, another one that just has this primal sizzle on the bass. Everything about this is just putrid, filthy, and for the most part pretty fast, but honestly, there's a lot of groove on here, and this features the longest songs I think I've heard by this band. Granted, I've only heard one other album, but that was definitely notable because grind's not noted for having very long songs. Of Gangrene Limbs, Sick Possessions, and Simmered in Mephitis, whatever. All of them have notable groovy sections, good riffy breakdowns. There's even some squealy dive bomb leads in there. Simmered in Mephitis, whatever the hell that word is. There's some good vocal flips in there. Again, more of that Carcass vibe. It also has a really creepy horror synth outro to it. Very short listen, but also just grimy and packed full of just like really cool riff changes. I really wasn't expecting anything outside of like just more straightforward primal death grind, but honestly, there's some points in there that kind of surprised me with some just really solid death metal riffing. Also, killer drum work on here. Lots of fun fills, lots of cool blast beat patterns and such. Yeah, this is just flat out fun. It's rotten, filthy, gory death grind. Maybe you can call it gore grind. I don't know. I hear more death metal influence on here, and this doesn't have a lot of the tropes of like gore grind, or at least in terms of like modern gore grind, I guess. I don't know. I like it. This is just goopy and rotten, and I love death grind. So yeah, if you're a big fan of Carcass, again, Terrorizer, maybe a touch of Exhumed in here too, check this out. Really solid EP. Swampgrave, Hollow Souls. This is the debut EP from this Louisiana-based death metal / hardcore act. Yet another one that I picked up, I believe, at Iron Fortress, just because it was like, well, I mean, I could just throw another one in there. Why not? The description sounded nice. I like old school death metal. I like hardcore. This definitely fits in the vein of bands like Frozen Soul and Creeping Death and bands that really just sort of embody that blend of styles. The opening track, Visceral Tomb, kicks off with swampy noises. You hear the crickets and the frogs and then someone digging a grave. And yeah, it's right off to the races with mid-tempo chugs and heavy tremolos, a lot of bolt thrower energy on here. You get some two-steps, like some more menacing hardcore breakdowns in here. The production in here is a nice, like, dense sound overall, good chunky guitars. When it comes down to their death metal side, this is very meat and taters, except it's like gator meat and swamp taters, if that's a thing. I don't know what they eat down there. Very groove-oriented. Occasionally you get some more, like, doomy, atmospheric stuff, like Desecrated Conclave comes in. A little bit slower, a little bit more menacing. Great tremolo harmonies on there. The vocals definitely stay more on the hardcore side. Like they kind of have like a good hardcore yell. Kind of similar to Spirit World or even like Hatebreed to a degree. And the atmosphere in here I think is pretty cool, but there's also like a fun sense of humor in here. I can't remember which track it was, but they have a Trailer Park Boys sample in there, and it's Leahy talking about the shit blizzard coming. It might have been Scattered in the Sewers. I don't know. That one kind of reminded me a lot of Obituary, and generally if things remind me of Obituary, I like them. The closing track to Carnal Tormentor, honestly, one of the heaviest tracks on here. Love the two steps on there. Just nasty, gross, fucking heavy-ass riffs. This is definitely something I've heard a dozen times before, but it's also one of those things that I don't care if I've heard it a dozen times before. When it's done well, I'm gonna jam it. And this is just straight up gross, groovy, gnarly riff-based death metal with a little bit of hardcore seasoning in there. So metal-wise, that makes for a good gumbo or a jambalaya. I don't know, I want to throw in some more Louisiana references in there. Anyway, if you're a big fan, again, of Obituary, Jungle Rot, I would definitely say some Frozen Soul and Creeping Death in there, a little bit of Gate Creeper too. Check this out, this is a solid EP. The Hellacopters Overdriver. This is the 9th album overall from this band of Swedish retro rockers fronted by Nick Anderson of Entombed fame. I've been a fan of this band since By the Grace of God. I think that was like 2004. Absolutely love that album. I went over their last one, Eyes of Oblivion, in a collection update as well. I love this band. This band just embodies everything that I like about like 70s rock with like some power pop hooks. Every song is riffy, catchy, kind of just fun anthemic rockers. In comparison to the last one, this is definitely a little bit more, I would say, like accessible. It doesn't kind of have that gritty, kind of punkier edge that this band usually has. The opening track, Token Apologies, comes in like a lost track from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's got big pianos in it. Fun, just catchy riffs right away, great vocal harmonies. And this is pretty much just the band doing, I think, what they do really well. Like Doomsday Daydreams, Coming Down, really just catchy songs. Coming Down sounds like a mix of like Thin Lizzy and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Like you get the dual guitar harmonies in there, but there's a little bit of a southern twang to it. There's some good up-tempo, rowdier tracks in here. Wrong Face On, Far Away Looks, Leave a Mark, I thought was a really catchy one too. But I like it when they kind of slow down and get into kind of like a blues rock groove. The Stench in particular on here is one of my favorite tracks. I love the sultry, bendy blues licks that are all over that song. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid album. It's definitely less rowdy than the last one. Like it kind of lacks a bit of that biting, kind of snarling rock, like R-A-W-K sort of energy. But this is still really well done. I don't think this band really has a bad album. They have one particular sound that they execute, and they execute it well pretty much every time. So yeah, if you're a longtime Hellacopters fan, and I mean, if you like stuff like Cheap Trick, Thin Lizzy, God, man, Rick Derringer, I don't know. Like, there's a whole bunch of, like, fun 70s rock on here that I could compare this to. But yeah, if you just like that sort of sound, check this out. Awesome band in general. I think the last one might be a little bit better, but this is still really damn good. Rants of Gomorrah, Infectious Vermin. This is the debut album from this two-man German death metal act. We were initially going to go over this one, namely because I had this band confused with Eggs of Gomorrah, which I believe is a Swiss dissonant death metal act or blackened death metal act. I don't know. I like that band. I thought it was this band. I was wrong. Part of me kind of wishes we did go over it because this was kind of an odd listen. This feels very slapped together, and I would say that this band almost will change its style every few tracks. Like, it's definitely death metal at its core, but it's a lot of different styles of death metal. So much so that it sounds like a different band playing behind the same singer. Like, this was the singer auditioning for different bands. Like, oh, I need to do an old school death metal band. Cool, let's just throw in some bull thrower riffs and some grooves there. Oh, you want something with a little bit more like distance or death doom, blackened death doom elements? Sure, we can do Tales of Unknown or Night Orbit, or the last track, Vat of Acid, which kind of sounded like a Behemoth B-side. The production, I'd say, is like universal on here, and at times it works and at times it doesn't. Like, it depends on the style they're going for. The guitars don't have like a universal fit at times. Like, you know, certain songs like Swarming Death, like they're trying to do a more heavy metal sort of death and roll sound, and they just don't have like quite the sound for it. But in other songs they sound stronger because they're going for a style that's a little more adept to what they're doing. This is not necessarily directionless, but maybe it's going in too many different directions. Like, you've been given an inside look at this band actually finding their sound because they just, I don't know, I put out everything they recorded on one album. It's so all over the place. Like, I don't know what I would release as a single on here because the songs can be so vastly different. Like, the song Strychnos sounds very at the gatesy. In fact, the vocalist uses more of a mid-register there, almost kind of like Thomas Lindbergh. In fact, he kind of sounds like him. But the rest of the album does not sound that way. Same thing with like Narcissus, which feels like their token Morbid Angel tribute. They got like the heavy, deep tremolos. It's more lumbering. It's kind of got that Where the Slime Lives sort of vibe to some of the sections, but it's not at the core of their sound, which I don't know what the core of this band's sound is, other than like a very kind of like generalized like death metal sound, I guess. But it's not where like the songs have like a similar quality to them. Like, all of them really do sound different, but not like the same band. Granted, you have the same singer on it, but I don't know, like the whole thing, I don't know, it was kind of off-putting, but at times I'm like, well, that sounds really good. Maybe we should stick with that. Nope, fuck that. The next track's gonna be something completely different. So basically, I'd say like none of this is bad. It's just really uneven. This band needs to kind of like, you know, decide on a particular sound. They definitely do like the dissonant death doom stuff really well. The Melodeath song in here I thought was pretty good. There's definite avenues to pursue here for this band in terms of like kind of getting one particular sound together. But yeah, this just feels like a collection of odds and ends. Still, I mean, if you're a fan of death metal in general, At the Gates and Morbid Angel, Bolt Thrower, Obituary, maybe, I don't know, Hypocrisy too. Throw them in there, why the fuck not? Just check it out for yourself. Who knows, you might really dig this. I would definitely check out a second album by this band, but I'm hoping there's going to be like a little bit more cohesion on the next one. Relics of Humanity, Absolute Dismal Domain. This is the third album from this Belarusian brutal death metal act. I actually got into this band courtesy of the Metalhead box. I got a compilation sent to me. God, man, that was years ago, probably like the early days of the channel. Again, one of those like videos I don't recommend people go back and watch because we weren't very good at this. We thought about going over this one the week it came out, but there were just too many other releases, and I don't know if it would have been like necessarily the best review. I'm very picky when it comes down to brutal death metal, and while this band definitely delivers on the brutality and just a lot of just raw heft, there's definitely some issues with this. Like, you know, right from the rip, I noticed the production was dense as hell, but the levels feel odd. Like, the guitars are murky and down-tuned and swampy, but they also need to come up in the mix, and the low end on here is very indistinct. The guitars being down-tuned, and I think the bass being just really swampy, you kind of get this like wall of mud in the low end. But there were some things in here that I really did enjoy that kind of went a little bit outside of like the usual tropes of brutal death metal. Like, yes, this has tons of slams. This has just gross, gurgly, froggy vocals. In fact, you get some like interesting dual, froggy, panning back and forth vocals on his creation that no longer exists. But there's a lot of atmosphere to this. There's, you know, these like drawn out parts of like, I wouldn't say like clean guitars, but like more atmospheric guitars that kind of like lead into the slams and blast beats a little bit more cleverly. Like, baseline, I would still say this is very comparable to like Disgorge, like a little bit of Devourment, and occasionally, and there are more techie moments like Defeated Sanity, but I like the fact that it wasn't always about the big slams all the time. In fact, the snare in here wasn't an obnoxious piccolo snare, or at least they didn't have it like ping the fuck up to the point where I'm just annoyed as shit. But this album had some like pretty solid tracks with some really good grooves on it, like Taking the Shape of Infinity, Paralyzing the Light 2. I haven't heard Paralyzing the Light 1, so I can't really compare there. But I know I like that track. Actually, that was like one of my favorites on here. And Smoldering of Seraphim. Just good riffy grooves. I kind of wish the guitars were like a little bit more present in the mix because the riffs they're playing are pretty solid. Like, they're not just like the most basic chugging. There's some like cool intricacies to them. The last track, Dominion, which is a little bit more atmospheric, to get this cool like tribal drum pattern here, but it has like slam chugs, like a tribal slam, if that's a thing. If not, then maybe these guys are like pioneers of it. Honestly, like, production issues aside, I thought this was pretty decent. Again, there's enough variety in the songs where they do stand out a bit, and I like the additional atmosphere in here. Like, this doesn't just feel brutal, this feels like, you know, more dark and sinister at times. Like, there's just enough atmosphere in here to kind of like add a creepy texture to it. But yeah, again, if you're a big fan of like just brutal death metal in general, definitely Disgorge. I would say like probably the biggest comparison, but again, a little bit of Defeated Sanity too. Check this one out. Pretty decent stuff. And, you know, there's not a lot of metal bands from Belarus, so, you know, it's cool that this country's got some pretty fucking heavy representation here. And finally, we have Aluna, Feverdream. This is the 7th album from this UK stoner doom act. I've been grossly out of touch with this band. In fact, I didn't even realize that they had a different singer in here, because the one I have is from 2014, Awakening the Forest. That one had Sophie Day on vocals, which she was an awesome vocalist. This one has Sian Greenway, which she just recently left. In fact, they just got a new singer for this band this year, because Sian has another project where it's kind of like a retro glam thing, and she's wearing like, you know, zip up bodysuits and, yeah, kind of like a go-go dancer look. I don't know, she looks hot. Anyway, I hadn't revisited this band in a while, and honestly, this was a lot of fun. This definitely feels more along the lines of like stuff that's closer to like Clutch and the Sword. Definitely has its more metal moments on here, but a lot of this is just based on good bluesy rock hooks. The guitars are still heavy, they're still thick. The production here is just very rich sounding, very analog. And Sian, or Sean, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, she also plays flute. That shows up on, let's see, Trickster of Time and Celestial. A little bit of that, you know, Jethro Tull sort of flair to it. That's twice I've mentioned Jethro Tull in this video. But there are like some classic like 70s prog influences on here, like a little bit of Yes, and again, like Jethro Tull, Gentle Giant. Great vocal harmonies. Sion or Sean, her vocals are great. She has this very powerful, very gravelly, very sultry voice. She croons and bellows. She adapts herself well to pretty much every stylistic shift on here, which this mostly just goes between stoner rock and stoner metal. Either way, you're getting like big Sabbathy hooks on pretty much every track. Celestial, Sacred Grooves, and Far From Reality, I would say, are probably like the heavier cuts. You get a little bit more of that doom metal vibe. It sounds a little bit more ominous. But there's some cool softer moments in here, like the title track in particular. I don't know, I just love the vibe of that. It's very, you know, kind of relaxing. The vocals in that song in particular, I absolutely love. And Hazy Jane is a little bit of like a bait and switch because it leads you in with like soft, almost like lounge music. Again, her sultry vocals are absolutely perfect for the vibe. And it's a steady, slow build, and it gets a lot heavier towards the end, but you kind of feel like you're gonna stay in this little dive bar sort of vibe and kind of moves out to like, I don't know, like a big rock concert. There's some soft synths and like clean melodic guitars in there. Just a really solid jam. And that's kind of like the vibe on like all these songs. They feel like just straightforward, riffy jams. There's a lot of stuff in here that I feel can be kind of comparable to Clutch. In fact, I'd be surprised if this band hasn't played with Clutch. Like, they seem like they'd be a perfect fit. Yeah, this was just a flat-out riffy jam. Like, you can just sit back and play this front to back and just kind of groove to it. Kind of curious about the new singer. Kind of big shoes to fill because I honestly really just dig the vocals on here. But I'm sure they recruited well, so I'm kind of curious what this band does in the future. But yeah, if you're a big fan of like Black Sabbath, Clutch, The Sword, especially like later Sword, like the last couple of albums, check this out. Really solid stuff. And that will do it for another collection update. And I'm already working on the next one, and I'll probably have a States of Metal done in between there too, so more stuff coming. We're also working on a couple of different discussion ideas for videos too, so yeah, plenty of content coming, of course, because it's what we do. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which we're going to continue to try to do monthly. It depends on when we're available. Again, everyone's kind of got different schedules and such. Either way, though, memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our hats and shirts that is linked down below. And of course, if you would like to join the channel and become a member, there is a join button down here, someplace for you to just press or touch, or I don't know, like rub your nose on it. Yeah, you do whatever you want to. As long as it makes the little clicky sound like, hey, you just joined the membership thing, then you did it right. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, sharing, all that stuff. It means the world to us. It is just, again, amazing to see this channel grow well beyond any expectations I ever had. I know, same stuff at the end of all these videos, but I mean it. We're appreciative as fuck for like literally everything you guys have given us. And we're looking forward to, again, overloading you guys with more content in the future. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.